Hello and welcome to this Monday's weekly morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, OpenAI staff and investors swing behind Sam Altman returning as CEO, as well as that Israeli forces advance in Gaza City as Benjamin Netanyahu resists international calls for a ceasefire, as well as that Jeremy Hunt vows to cut taxes, or at least, vows to show the UK is on the path to a low tax economy. We've got lots to talk about also on the charts, as well as lots is happening on the economic calendar. We'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around to see that. Before we get straight into it, make sure to subscribe. But the first article to talk about, of course, is OpenAI. Now, the top OpenAI executives have swung behind Sam Altman. Now, this comes as a groundswell of support from employees and investors raised pressure on board members to reinstate the chief executive of the company behind ChatGPT that they sacked on Friday. Now, OpenAI, ChatGPT, these are, the key kind of things that we're talking about at the moment within fintech, within, finance in relation to emerging industries. As we have seen from ChatGPT, this has been a kind of revolution within finance almost, or at least within business, in the way it's already beginning to change, the way that business is structured, the way that people conduct their work life, and now, opening up this new industry to investments, of course. And as we've seen with OpenAI, great levels of investment. We've talked about this kind of topic somewhat, but not too much. And obviously there's lots to talk about within this. Now, venture capital backers and executives at Microsoft who have committed more than $10 billion to OpenAI are expected to have a key role in the negotiations, with options including clearing out the board and reinstating Altman being explored, of course. Now, Altman does seem to be a more popular figure within, the kind of actual workers in OpenAI and ChatGPT, as well as with the venture capital backers. It was the board, however, that does seem to, dislike Altman based on his, recent actions, which we'll get into, in a second, with a memo to staff by the Chief Strategy Officer, Jason Kwon, saying he was optimistic that Altman and co-founder Greg Brockman, who both quit on Friday, Greg Brockman, did quit on Friday after Sam Altman was fired, would return, and, kind of trying to reassure employees, because it does seem that employees, are kind of swinging behind Altman on this issue. And in weeks before his sacking, Altman had been reportedly attempting to raise as much as $100 billion from investors to establish a new microchip development company. And this does seem to be the thing which did kind of cause some worries within, the board of OpenAI. If you're looking at this from a CEO's point of view, you could kind of be saying, at least, why would a CEO be devoting so much time into an external project apart from, the kind of thing that he's supposed to be working on, which is the kind of open AI industry, and that sort of thing, the regenerative, the AI kind of industry, and this kind of shift in his focus could be what the board members are worrying about, but it does seem that this hasn't swayed the investors and staff, which do seem to back Sam Altman still, with Sam Altman's firing shocking Silicon Valley, as he had been the leading voice within the AI industry, acting as a de facto leader of all the AI startups, after him following the technology's breakthrough with the product of ChatGPT, as Altman was leading the AI startup industry, meeting presidents and prime ministers and regulators on a world tour, and I believe he was at an Asia meeting just a day before being sacked. And it's kind of these kind of moments where Altman's presenting himself as the key figurehead of the entire AI movement and AI industry, and then suddenly is sacked. Obviously is causing some worries, some issues, and some tensions. And investors have already also rallied behind Altman over the weekend, including VC backers. And investors could refuse further backing of the board, and employees could quit the company in an attempt to force the board's hand. So keep your eyes on this topic, of course, as the story does develop. But next to talk about, of course, is the Israeli forces. Now, the IDF is advancing through Gaza City, following taking control over the main hospital. And this was a topic that we were talking about last week in reference to, I believe, Al-Shifa's hospital, the main hospital within Gaza. We do know it was housing many kind of refugees from the war. Many people were also being being patients and being treated there. However, the IDF and Israeli government were accusing the Al-Shifa hospital, especially underground the hospital, for housing Hamas infrastructure. We understand that Hamas has embedded itself in other residential infrastructure, but the IDF was making this kind of clear claim that Hamas had embedded itself into the infrastructure at the hospital. And so we were kind of expecting actions against the hospital as a result. And this is kind of what we did see with the IDF going into the hospital. Last week we spoke about their kind of engagements with militants reportedly at the hospital, and then going into the basement to search it. Now, this comes as the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has vowed to resist international pressure for a ceasefire. And we have heard this from numerous leaders now calling for a ceasefire, even on the more Western side, which is more pro-Israel. Even from Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, we have started to hear calls for a temporary ceasefire, at least to allow for hostages to be kind of extracted from the strip, with the IDF reporting 9 soldiers dead over the weekend, as we do understand that clashes continue to take place within the strip. Now, over 1 million are believed to be displaced outdoors, with disease now being a risk as a result of sewage flowing in the streets as a result of heavy rain. And this obviously is a large humanitarian issue, and a large issue with why Israel is receiving so much kind of backlash, so much condemnation, is kind of these issues which are now occurring for the civilian population of Gaza City as the IDF takes on Hamas. The kind of civilians are caught in the crossfire in the sense of being displaced, and obviously having issues with disease and that sort of thing. And that's what we're seeing now. The IDF spokesperson in a press conference defending the army's actions at Al-Shifa shared so-called concrete evidence of Hamas hiding hostages there, with security cam footage showing Hamas vehicles bringing hostages into the hospital. Now, this was kind of another comment made by the Israeli military, and this was something that we were kind of seeing and fearing on October 7th, when we were seeing all those hostages being taken away on vehicles. Those hostages have to be taken somewhere, and with the hospital having such a large kind of building, such great infrastructure, large basements, the worry was that hostages were to be taken to these large residential areas. And according to the IDF spokesperson in this kind of press conference, he is now saying that there's concrete evidence of Hamas showing taking hostages to that area, with the hostages being from October the 7th, so the day of the massacre, where over 1,000 Israeli civilians were massacred by Hamas militants, and had hostages from Thailand and Nepal taken into the hospital reportedly and hidden. with Netanyahu on Saturday saying a limited amount of fuel would be allowed into Gaza to stave off, a feared outbreak of disease, as we were talking about with the sewage issue. As he said, he rejected, the call by Joe Biden for a greater Palestinian Authority role in Gaza post-war, and this was something that we spoke about last week in reference to Joe Biden and Antony Blinken's talks with the Palestinian Authority, with Joe Biden kind of espousing that rhetoric around the Palestinian Authority having greater control going into Gaza following the end of this war. Now, the death toll for the war is mounting following the massacre on October the 7th, of course, where 1,000 civilians were massacred, 200 taken hostage, and the adverse effects for that within the region of southern Israel were great. But now Palestinian deaths are reportedly reaching over 11,000, with another 3,000 unaccounted for as a result of the communication blackout, as well as people just being trapped under rubble. So a huge humanitarian disaster as a result of this conflict, of course. But Qatar's Prime Minister has made claims that there's already been good progress within the past few days in relation to leading negotiations with Hamas over the release of hostages. And this is something we keep coming back to, as Qatar is the kind of leading voice within these hostage negotiations. It has that relation to the Hamas kind of leadership, but it also has that strong relationship with the West, and especially the US with their military kind of partnerships and that sort of thing. And as a result, the kind of US has been acting as a proxy for Israel, it does seem, and Qatar's been acting as a bit of a proxy for Hamas, and in this effort they've been able to try and already achieve the release of some hostages, and now they're trying to achieve the release of some more. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses as the conflict does continue to take place. But next to talk about, of course, is Jeremy Hunt, as he does vow to show the UK is on a path to a low tax economy, with Jeremy Hunt promising this on Saturday. Jeremy Hunt has promised to show Britain's on a path to a low tax economy, and this comes ahead of this week's autumn budget statement. Obviously, this is very significant for UK politics, UK governance, and the Treasury of the UK, as this is in reference to the whole budget of the British government going forward. But it more importantly highlights kind of the economic policy, economic policies of the Tory party going into the election year of 2024. As we do know, the Tories are on the back foot in comparison to Labour. And seeing how Jeremy Hunt lays out this plan will be a good indication of how Rishi Sunak will position himself going into 2024. Now, Hunt said his focus would be on promoting growth, adding that low taxes were a key part of the policy. Now, going back to when kind of Rishi Sunak took power, along with Jeremy Hunt, we can remember the kind of rhetoric that was more, bring down inflation, make sure we can fix that half inflation. But it does seem that now we've been able to reach that, Jeremy Hunt does want to also make it clear that strong growth is very important. And that's something that's very important to voters as well, along with inflation. And so obviously the goal is to have low inflation, high growth. And that's what Jeremy Hunt is seemingly trying to establish going into this autumn meeting. But he also warned that he would not announce any tax cuts that risked pushing inflation higher and as a result, damaging the Bank of England's ability to bring down inflation. A cut to income tax or national insurance would benefit more people than other cuts, but would, of course, add to inflation. So this is the key issue for Jeremy Hunt is, does he make tax cuts like bringing down the inheritance tax rate, but then, leave out the majority of people, which would far more benefit from, a kind of a tax cut on income or a national insurance tax cut, And so that's kind of the issue which Jeremy Hunt has to deal with, it does seem. But he has suggested that although cuts would take place, quite possibly they would be at least partly funded by cuts to welfare. And obviously this does create another kind of issue and kind of topic of conversation as the kind of topic of, do we have welfare but low taxes, or no, do we have welfare but high taxes, or low taxes and low welfare? And it's kind of dealing with this issue, especially in the times that we're in with the cost of living crisis, which Jeremy Hunt is going to have to kind of balance, with Hunt going on to say there's no easy way to reduce the tax burden, obviously in reference to cutting welfare, with the government expected to clamp down on sickness benefits and the workability assessment, which is used to identify people who qualify for more generous benefits. So keep your eyes on this, but we'll be covering it going into this week. But next to talk about, of course, is the charts, with firstly to talk about US indices. Now, US indices are seemingly consolidating going into this week. We did highlight how, the US indices have, especially the US 30, has been pushing to the upside since the start of November, but it did experience that kind of period of consolidation after it kind of encountered this area of resistance and trend line around the 8th of November, but was able to find that kind of bullish momentum to continue moving higher. I believe that was off the back of that US inflation data, which kind of showed that inflation wasn't too bad. But this is kind of another situation of consolidation that we're experiencing now, which is similar to the one that we experienced around the 8th of November and that sort of thing, as price is coming into contact with this area of resistance, this area of prior highs. It does seem to be acting as a strong area of resistance, as well as the psychological level is obviously having a great part to play, with that being the 35,000 mark for the US 30. So it's no surprise that we're seeing some consolidation take place around there. So that's important. So that's why it's important to keep note of any US data to come out this week, as that will highly influence how US indices do move as a result. So keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about though is the dollar. Now the dollar has seemingly continued moving lower, and this obviously is following the initial move to the downside that we did see with the US inflation data. Now we did mark out kind of these areas on the Fibonacci retracement tool as areas which price could come back to and return to before continuing lower. But it does seem that price just could not find the kind of momentum to take that move to the upside before continuing lower, and has just continued to push to the downside. And now it's broken those prior lows. It'll be interesting to see where price could go down to. Obviously, we have these kind of lows around here, with the the most recent low of those being the 103.3 area. So keep your eyes on that, and that would be below this kind of Fibonacci extension level. So keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about though is Euro USD, which as a result of the dollar making moves to the downside, we have seen Euro USD continue a push to the upside. So obviously, like the dollar, we weren't able to see Euro USD tap that 38.20 mark, and surprisingly, it's continued to break out of this kind of upward bullish channel, and it's just taken a really strong move to the upside. So it'd be interesting to see where price can now go. Obviously, that kind of strong movement to the upside could obviously come crashing back down very quickly in a retracement action, of course, as price does become kind of overbought, and we are seeing that already on the kind of RSI, with that bearish divergence kind of already being made. So keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about though is pound yen, which we were talking about this kind of area of resistance, which had been made prior as an area which price could come down, retrace to, and then continue higher. But it does seem that there's been so much bullish momentum to the upside that price had to retrace further, and price came down all the way to the 78.60 level, and now is seemingly making a continuation to the upside. It'll be interesting though to see whether it can actually gain the momentum to continue that move to the upside. After all, we have seen so much bullish momentum recently that, you know, we're kind of expecting somewhat of a kind of consolidation period as a result. And this kind of it's hard to explain, but this kind of price action that we've seen around here could be referencing most certainly a kind of stall within price. But, you know, keep your eyes on this, of course. Next to talk about though is Bitcoin, which really isn't doing too much interesting. It's, you know, being a bit crazy, of course, with, you know, price just jabbing these areas of liquidity. Most recently, you know, it does seem that Bitcoin is highly reactive of of these psychological levels as a result of the amount of, you know, retail traders involved within this market. And as a result, you know, we are seeing Bitcoin range around greatly. It'll be interesting to see where price can go though, as it's kind of consolidating within this range right now. So keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about though is gold, which has continued that kind of bullish momentum to the upside, but has now seemingly kind of reacted slightly to the 78.60 Fibonacci area. As we can see here, that kind of bearish sell-off from that level, which is similar to the one that we did see from price after it did come into contact with another Fibonacci area, the 6180 Fibonacci area, as well as that strong area of liquidity. Doesn't seem we have that, you know, area of liquidity the same on you know, the 78.60 in this case, but price is still reacting to it nonetheless. But, you know, we could be just looking at another, you know, short retracement before, you know, a continuation to the upside. So keep your eyes on gold, as it's looking very interesting as price continues to move, following tapping that 38.20 Fibonacci level. Next to talk about though is oil, of course, with, you know, last week us highlighting that $80 a barrel level as an area which price could come back up to and retest before continuing lower. After all, you know, price did break below that $80 mark, and so we were expecting somewhat of a retracement. We haven't quite seen that, and we've actually retraced further to the upside and above that 38.20 fib, breaking even above that 50% Fibonacci area. So it'd be interesting to see how oil plays out. So keep your eyes on that. Lastly to talk about though, of course, is the economic calendar, with quite a bit of data coming out this week. So firstly, we do have Canadian inflation rate, as well as that we will have the FOMC's minutes coming out from the US, as well as that we do have the UK's autumn statement, which we did talk about in the articles earlier, as well as that we do have US consumer sentiment, along with, you know, US durable good order. So keep your eyes on that, as well as that we do have German manufacturing. That's an important one, considering how strong the German economy is in relation to the, you know, Eurozone as a whole. But, you know, in recent times, we have seen the kind of a German economy struggling, especially the manufacturing sector. But we are forecasting better performance from the manufacturing sector than last month. So keep your eyes on this data. Very important, of course. So as that we have Japanese inflation rate, along with German GDP growth rate and business climate figure. So keep your eyes on all this data. We've covered a lot on the articles though, a lot on the charts, and now a lot on the economic calendar. But that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. I hope you have a great trading week. Get into it this week and have a good one. But see you later. Bye.